Hi, I'm Paula, Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. The purpose of the show is to go into topics more deeply. I've had this show on for quite a few seasons now, but before I used to have a cable public access show called The Whole Tooth, where I was dealing with any issues that had to do with dentistry. And because everything is connected to everything, teeth was also connected to other parts of the body. And very quickly I became interested in a group called HEAL, Health Education AIDS Liaison. And this group was promoting a clear understanding about what AIDS really was and whether or not HIV was really an issue. After I had the show, I went to India for 4 years. I was in search of knowledge that was more powerful and more effective to make my charity work become more useful. When I came back, I started the show Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because I had interviews that were quite old, maybe 7 years old, with people who were stars on the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, which was a movie about how you create reality. And I felt that our interviews went into the topic deeper, so I called the show Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. About that time, I got a DVD in my mail that was probably because of the philanthropist Jimmy Walter. And this DVD showed, it was about the World Trade Center. And I thought, I should learn about the World Trade Center and what happened at 9/11 because I was in an ashram in India at that time. And as I watched this video, which I thought would be 1 hour but turned out to be 3 hours, as it was 1 o'clock in the morning, my jaw was just about on the floor as I'm watching projected up onto my wall. I usually had projected things, spiritual things, Krishnamurti, things about raising our consciousness. So I had somebody else there with me. None of us knew what to expect. And we just had projected on my whole wall the explosions in the World Trade Center. And at that point I thought, if I don't put my attention and energy on this, because Amy Goodman wasn't and a lot of the left gatekeepers wasn't, well, it was just something I had to deal with. I would put it on my show a little while, they'd get with it, I could get back to my spiritual topics, and 9/11 truth would be resolved. In any case, today I have with me Rodkowski, who is one of the outstanding leaders in the 9/11 Truth movement here in New York. And Luke, thank you for joining me on this show.
Thank you for having me so much.
Yeah. And on the telephone we have with us Stephen Allen, and Stephen Allen has done a video on AIDS. Welcome to Farther Down the Rabbit Hole, Stephen.
Well, thank you, Paula, and hello to you, Luke, and I appreciate the work that both of you are doing.
Now, I want to tie both of you together now. That's why I had to give a little lengthy introduction. Stephen, 2 days ago, I was sent an email that said, take a look at this video. I went over to it, and for 2 hours on Google, I watched one of the best documentaries I've ever seen on AIDS, and I also got to see for the first time a man whose work I only read about, and that was Peter Duesberg. And I thought you handled it with such sensitivity. And there was a certain point where Dr. Duesberg, who was, well, tell people about Dr. Duesberg, and then I'll tell you my impressions.
Okay, well, you have to remember that Peter Duesberg was one of the most prominent retrovirologists in his field. He had actually discovered oncogenes and was nominated for the Nobel Prize. He was the man who discovered the genes that cause cancer. And as a person who is a cornerstone in retrovirology and cancer research, at the time that Gallo released his announcements about the probable cause of AIDS, which was HIV, he took a stand against the entire government-funded AIDS industry. It's a little bit like Stephen Jones in the 9/11 movement. Very same thing. We've seen the same thing. This is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about talking to your guest, Luke, because the similarities between what's happened with the media and HIV/AIDS and 9/11 are just astounding. It's the same military psyops. But anyway,
hang on just a second. Can we put up in the character generator at all times, I either want Steve's website or where to go to, or Luke's, because both of these you're going to see as the topic goes on are going to be very interwoven. Okay, carry on, Steve. Sorry to interrupt you.
Well, it's been the same sort of thing. We've been blacklisted in the news media. We keep coming up to the surface for a little while, and then they try to sweep us under the rug and say we're debunked. And this is why it's kind of fun to actually talk to the 9/11 people, because we've been through the same thing for 20 years. We're about four times older, actually. And you're seeing the same kinds of military psyops. The news media is trying to blow us off as freaks and crazies, and yet all the evidence that we have is completely supportive of a point of view that really brings home the reality that we've been deceived, we've been lied to, we're being manipulated. The virus cause is a lot like the terrorists of 9/11. It's a hidden, mysterious, supposed false flag culprit that you can't pin down, you can't find, you can't get a remedy to. There's no vaccine, there's no drugs, but we've got to keep fighting this war against AIDS.
Now, Stephen, I want to slow you down because I'm going to have channel surfers who've heard this for the first time, and it's so astonishing. So please go to Stephen Allen's website, which is aidsfraudvideo.com. And what I want to mention, Stephen, when I saw it for 2 hours, the documentary on Google, I wanted to meet with you right away, but at the same time, I was hoping that you wouldn't be annoyed that somebody threw your video, your documentary that you must have put thousands and thousands of dollars into producing, that it was just free on Google. And I was delighted to find out that you were the one that put it on Google. So could you tell people about why you made this choice and what the result has been?
Well, the interesting phenomena with the internet, as the 9/11 folks know, is that we're getting the information out faster, free, on Google than we are trying to market this information. And I learned the hard way. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't want to do this, but for 10 years being frozen out of the mainstream media, the way the 9/11 information was frozen out, we couldn't get it out there. So, after putting the site up there for a while and getting something like 170,000 hits, which is small compared to what, some of the films like Loose Change and 9/11 Mysteries and a few of the others that are out there.
What's the numbers again, Steve?
Well, about 170,000. And this was after, at a point, people told me you should take it down and try to market this information because we need the money to do more work right now. And I tried that for a little bit, and it didn't work, and I wasn't happy with it. I thought, well, we might have made a few extra dollars, but that's not worth a human life. We've got to get this information out. And one of the reasons why I really appreciate you, Paula, is because you're letting us explain to folks that we want this information to go out freely. If you haven't had a chance to get this information, don't pay us anything. Just go up and get it for free off of Google. If you want to help out, go to our website. You can buy a download for $1.99. Or you can get a DVD. But the idea right now is just like with 9/11, we have to get this information out. We need to tie in, I think, with a lot of people like Luke at 9/11 and other folks. I've been in touch with Sophia at 9/11. We know there's a number of other people who are in the 9/11 movement who are looking at the same things. And we're forming a solidarity about some of these same New World Order agendas.
So, Luke, what do you think about giving things away?
I mean, you're totally right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's called viral marketing. And now, the mainstream media, Fox 5, ABC, Channel 11, they have, the TV. But with the internet, we really have a new opportunity to educate a lot more people than, previously before. And it's a beautiful thing. And what you're doing, Stephen, is excellent. And that's one way of doing it in a positive, in a positive way and in an effective way also. I mean, I'm also a filmmaker. I also made the film Dedicated. It's available on wearechange.org, and it goes, and it talks about the truth movement, the police infiltration, and it's a whole big dedication to my friend Dan Wallace. And, I put it out there for free. And whoever wants to help will donate. And, and I think getting the information out there before collecting or making a dollar is not only beautiful but effective. With the internet, you reach so many more people with giving something out free, and actually the benefits come later.
Because sometimes people come back and donate, don't they?
People do come back and donate. People do look at the information. I mean, Loose Change is free on the internet. Mysteries, free on the internet. Terror Storm, free on the internet.
So,
and people still buy these films to support these movements.
So, Stephen, can you tell us how much did you spend producing that incredible documentary?
Well, we were back in the days just before the transition to desktop video, so we shot it on SP beta and mastered on digital beta. It ran us about $40,000.
Right.
We carried the debt for about 8 years and finally went bankrupt. We were frozen out. What happened was the distributors, people would not handle it. We even took it to places like Creative Artists in L.A., and we were turned down everywhere. I could go into a lot of kind of negative feelings about this, but I'd rather
Sure.
just to say that it's been a long haul.
But nevertheless, when people see it on Google, they can go to your website and buy a really crispy, clean version from you for about, what, $15, $20?
Yeah, that includes the shipping and everything, or they can download it. Our download on our site is actually better. It's a smaller file, but a better file than the one they'll get on Google.
Oh, of course, of course. But the point, though, is that when you have a message that's really important, it's possible to get it out there. And I was very interested in Peter Duesberg because there was a certain point that he was talking about AZT, this incredibly lethal drug that's really what's causing the problems with AIDS. The AZT was being given to pregnant mothers and children, and you could just about hear in this professor, scientist, German, his accent, the heartbreak, almost on tears, that he thought, how could this happen in this country? And I know so many people thought, how could Duesberg, who was getting $1 million a year, he was the outstanding investigative journalist, is that right, Stephen?
He had an outstanding investigator grant from the National Institutes of Health. He was a retroviral research person at Berkeley.
He was funded to the tune of $1 million a year for or how many years?
18 years.
18
he had
years.
Grants.
He got grants.
And he's a member of the National Academy of Sciences. So he was well known. He's not the only one. We have Dr. Carey Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize for inventing PCR, the polymerase chain reaction.
No, but see, what my interest here on this, Stephen, is the whole idea of farther down the rabbit hole is like wake up, because people are like in a trance, and it was his response that so moved me. Even though I've known about this for 10 years, it sort of re-inspired me to get people to really pay attention and to be their own physicians and to notice, what's really going on as opposed to what we're being told. That's all I meant about that.
Right on, Paula, and you're doing a fine job with this. I know you've had Michael Elner from Heal and Tom Ferdinando, both of them who I've talked with and spoken with for years, and we've been friends over the phone at least. They're doing a great job in Heal in New York. If you know somebody that's HIV positive, definitely get in contact with Heal New York. A lot of people all over the world, and I'm hoping that we can hook up with 9/11 people who will look at this now, because I'm in solidarity already with 9/11 and a lot of the people with 9/11, because it's the same people doing the same tactics. They're using fear and military psyops to condition us to follow protocols and agendas that are just counterproductive to anything that's even humane.
But Stephen, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. With 9/11, it's kind of hard to tell at this point, but with the HIV, immediately when people go down and really study, when a guy like Peter Duesberg is saying this is one of thousands of harmless passenger viruses that people carry around with them anyway, and has been here, he said, before the Constitution was here, and then you see people who have the courage to fire their doctors, which, Michael used to shock me. I used to think he was too severe. But it took me a while to really study it to understand what he meant.
Right. And there's a lot of other good things happening, too. All over the world, there are people waking up. President Thabo Mbeki in South Africa has withstood pressure from the international community to try to start giving AZT to these pregnant women. This stuff, AZT, is a DNA chain terminator. The babies are being born with all kinds of serious problems. You can imagine what would happen when you give an infant or a fetus a substance designed to destroy DNA. This is the kind of thing that's actually happening out there, and it's horrendous. The lies are they're just incredible. It mirrors the 9/11 movement very closely.
There really is a parallel, because it is a New World Order agenda that is taking place, with 9/11 and with AIDS, and it's really the elitists, like the Rockefellers, like the Rothschilds, which are using population control methods to controlling the population and only getting a more power grab than they have right now. And I definitely see the parallels with not only mainstream media propaganda, but the way the government spins it, the way the actions by our government towards the AIDS and towards 9/11. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Steve, but there's a video on YouTube where it was a clip of an MSNBC report where they talked about Bayer releasing AIDS in Europe. Did you ever see that video?
Yeah, I know what happened there. That was some of the old clotting factor that was sent back over that caused a lot of the HIV/AIDS positives in hemophiliacs.
Yeah, and the Bayer company knew about it, and they still willingly shipped this drug out with AIDS just to save some money.
There's an enormous amount of economics involved in this, and very similar in a lot of other ways. What we find are that the scholars, the people who are challenging these things, are being ostracized, diminished. They're losing their grants. We're being shoved out of the news media. We're made to nobody wants to debate this. Have you noticed that?
I mean, speaking of losing grants, what Duisberg said, he could not, after getting all of this research, all of this funding for decades, he couldn't get one grant to do a study on the relationship between hard drugs and the symptoms of AIDS.
Right on, Paula. And that's not only just hard drugs, that was all drugs. Now,
right.
If you want to think about that for a second, he was talking about looking at the long-term effects of all any kind of chemical or medical treatment.
Right. Well,
this is something that's very serious. The medical-industrial complex is actually, in many ways, bigger than the military-industrial complex when you consider that 500 million people died when Richard Nixon outlawed DDT. Now, this DDT wasn't a good pesticide. We know that. But the reality is these poor people had nothing to rely on, and they died from things like malaria and insect-borne diseases. 500 million people. So
you know what's so exciting, Stephen? We can start to get together panels and discussions because the peer review that didn't exist at the time that HIV was announced as a probable cause of AIDS, and as your documentary so carefully illustrates, it was even stolen in another virus from somewhere in France.
Yeah,
and it was a big embarrassment to the government, but they finally worked out who would share on the profits. I have somebody in the control room, Dean Lauren, because here at Public Access we support each other. And I'd like to introduce you to some of the most dynamic public access producers, and hopefully we'll get a dialogue going in the future on shows. And I'd like to actually have some physical conferences where people can come together, sit together, and discuss these things. But Dean passed me a note wanting to ask you about the special virus program. And Dean, can you speak, even though you're in the control room, since we have Stephen on the line?
Yes, the special virus cancer program was by NIH. My father worked in it, but it had notable scientists as Duisberg, Matilda Krim, Gallo, almost everybody associated with the AIDS industry. And so I wanted to get Stephen Allen's commentary on what he feels about the special virus cancer program and the manipulation of biological viruses in nature for use as military components.
That's certainly a possibility. We might look into that. The reason that you have to realize that what happened in 1980, the politics that took place when Reagan came in, he slashed the budget for the viral cancer research. So you had a lot of retrovirologists and people who were involved with virus cancer out of work.
Who needed a job? Oh my God! So they go, it's not good for cancer. Geez, maybe we can jump on HIV or AIDS.
Yeah, that's where Gallo came from, National Cancer Institute. So retroviruses have been studied for many years as the causes of cancer. See, actually, Peter Duisberg's first refutation against HIV was published in Cancer Research in 1987, and he discusses cancer or retroviruses or virology in terms of both cancer and AIDS in that article. So it's something you should look into. Matilda Krim or I'm trying to think of Gallo and a few of the other people that were out there. Max Essex from Harvard. There were a lot of these people very vocal, out of work, and so what happened was that the virus cancer program just made the jump from being the cause of cancer to the cause of AIDS.
Right.
And they refunded and retooled.
But one thing I want to emphasize, like on my show, I always try to end on an empowering note. What I loved about Michael Elner's work and the work that they'd done at HEAL, Health Education AIDS Liaison, is they had decades of experience empowering people to say no, and as a result, no to poisons, and as a result, they were regaining their health.
Yes,
they would have been dead.
We have enormous clinical results. One, Luke, I don't mean to leave you out, my friend, because I want to get in touch with you. But just one thing I want to say that one rewarding thing that we have that you don't have in 9/11 is we actually get a chance to meet the people who we've helped. Right. 9/11's kind of in the past. and of course, the ongoing war and everything, we're still trying to help all the people who inhaled all that toxic dust. But we're getting a chance to really heal. The heal's getting a chance to meet a lot of these people. We're seeing long-term survivors, people who have remained healthy with HIV for 15, 20 years now.
No, I'm glad you're bringing that up, but let me just say, it's not finished yet, Stephen.
Right.
9/11, we're healing the whole country.
Yes.
We're trying to take this country back. And to me, 9/11, you know, it wasn't only one day. I mean, that one day affects, you know, American policy for the next 100 years. And, you know, 9/11, what happened afterwards, I think the effects of that are way worse than the buildings collapsing, because now, currently, in New York City, we have 50,000 rescue workers, first responders, cops, firefighters, you know, dying because of the EPA's lies. And sadly, you know, unlike AIDS, there's really nothing we could do for these rescue workers. I mean, you know, I have many friends. My friend Craig Bartmer, David Miller, Mike McCormick. You know, those guys were heroes. Those guys went to save people, and they were sacrificed for money. You know, the EPA knew the air was bad to breathe, and they you know, they had reports stating that. And you know, the White House made them say the air was safe to breathe, just to open up the stock market. And you know what? I wish there was a way we could help these guys, but 50,000, you know, of my neighbors, you know, are sick and dying, and you know, it is a parallel. I know it will never amount to the amounts of people who died with AIDS, but 9/11 affects, you know, us for the next 100 years.
Well, you look at all the people in Iraq and the 3,000 soldiers, the numbers start adding up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And the reality is that both of these agendas are madness, they're insanity, and they need to be stopped and arrested. And I think we need to pull together solidarity, you know, with all of us working on so many different things here. People looking at other issues like the Federal Reserve Board, the way our finances have been leveraged overseas, the immigration issues, and the whole New World Order agenda.
I totally agree with you.
One thing I wanted to say just real quickly, because I don't want to take up too much more time, but you have to remember that Donald Rumsfeld was CEO of a company called Tamiflu, which has the entire patent of the bird flu vaccine in stock. And how can he be a CEO of a big biotech firm like this while handling two wars? I mean, do you see the connection?
Right.
Exactly. I mean, I totally agree with you, Stephen. I mean, I think one way we could connect the AIDS movement and the 9/11 Truth movement is by exposing the real power structure in America and in the world. And that's really talking about the Federal Reserve, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Group, and the Bilderberg Group. And I think if we expose those power structures, because, you know, Bush is a puppet, but if we expose the real power structures in America, I think then we could really start having significant change.
Can I say one thing on that, Stephen? Michael Elner once told me, and I believe it was on camera, that the human body has a capacity to handle huge amounts of toxins.
Yes.
But it has to be done intelligently. We have to understand what we're doing. I myself come from a commitment to the deepest possible spiritual knowledge, and spiritual knowledge that can manifest and create new realities. I studied with a master in the south of India who drank a pound of mercury. At the time when I was in the ashram, I thought, what a weird thing to do. But every time I hear about these workers and the stuff that's in their lungs, I always have this to sort of revert back to, that I know we can do astonishing things that we never even fathomed that we could do. But the first thing we have to do, like Webster Tarpley said, if you're too stupid to wake up, you know, what else can happen? In a certain way that, although I'm not a Darwinian, I'm not a creationist like these radical Christians, but I believe we evolved through cooperation. But there is something to be said for survival of the fittest. And if we can't get it, that these chemicals we're taking are killing us, whether they're prescribed or recreational, it doesn't bode well. But if we start waking up and we start helping each other to wake up and not be offended if somebody lumps us in with the problem because we're bringing miserable things to their attention, we can move into glorious realities, I feel.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And, you know, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the downside of this, but that positive point is very real. I think we're on the verge of seeing an incredible breakthrough in medical health, where the merger of holistic or natural health finally connects with the reality of medicine. But the problem is, just like everything else, at this point it's going the wrong direction. $300 billion probably wasted on AIDS, which should be spent on helping people like the firefighters. I I mean,
Right.
look at the problems of where the money has gone. And you're right on, Paula. You know, in my opinion, to do this program, I appreciate it. I want to get together with Luke. We'll have to have some talks. You know,
And also Dean, too.
yeah, Dean as well.
Yeah. Do you have anything more to say in the control room, Dean? I always like to support the people who are supporting me. Okay, maybe Dean's silent on this point, but let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, with science, sometimes people say, oh, you're against progress, you're against science. It's not that at all. It's just if you have scientists who are, some of them know that they're holding back the results of their studies, that's not science anymore.
No.
That's capitulation to a special interest. That's the opposite of science.
That's exactly what's been going on, too. And, you know, I mean, if you look at, to be honest with you, I think Luke just mentioned a few minutes ago about the, you know, the elitist CFR agenda. If you Google Rockefeller and eugenics and just start looking at the websites, you'll see the mirror of what the World Health Organization is doing with HIV/AIDS today.
Yeah.
The old eugenics program was unpopular. It's been replaced by the World Health Organization and UNAIDS. That's what it's the same people.
Now, Stephen, we only have 2 minutes left. I do want to conclude on one of my favorite topics, which is Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, and that means instead of giving labels or reward or punishment, because all labels, whether they're good labels or bad labels, without information doesn't allow people that you're trying to communicate with really understand what's going on. And in thinking about creating connections of empathy to try to empathize with the other person, I always try to go farther down the rabbit hole and imagine what it's like to be in the shoes of some of these people who may have inherited a certain, I don't know what to say, legacy, not really lifestyle. They've sort of inherited this situation where they are very powerful and they don't know where to start to try to rectify things. In a way, all of us who, for example, eat meat have to face factory farming conditions that are going on. So I always try to say, can we look into ourselves and see some element of greed or lack of security, and then imagine what it must be like when, like I think I heard that, what's our vice president's name?
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney. I heard he was the head of Halliburton, or he was involved, and they were facing lawsuits for asbestos. And sometimes it's really hard to imagine how you would work it out. We only have 30 seconds. Do you have a comment to make on empathizing with the rich guys? Stephen?
Well, I would just be glad to say that, you know, what we need to do is these people need to come clean, just become whistleblowers. There's a doctor by the name of Dr. Joseph Fishbein who just defected from the FDA and the NIH, and he needs help right now, trying to help us.
Great. Well, thank you for ending on that note. And I remember Webster Tarpley told me he searches his heart every day. So I want to thank you, Stephen, for joining me, and Luke for joining me. I'm Paula Gloria, and this is Farther Down the Rabbit Hole.